So probably my most important ministry mentor is someone named Dr. Gary Straub. We met when he was the interim minister at my last church after a long-time pastor left, and we've remained friends ever since. We talked this week. I told him what I was talking about in my sermon today. But I'm also here to tell you, Gary gave me the worst sermon topic of my entire life. He said, I want you to preach on the 7 I am statements of Jesus. All of them in one sermon. My writing partner almost quit that week. I kept her though, and I have to believe that was maybe not such a great sermon that I gave. So it's been a gift over Lent to be doing these one at a time. It's much nicer that way. We covered I'm the living water with the Samaritan woman. I am the resurrection with Martha. I am the light of the world with the blind man. And today's story is actually a continuation of that story of the blind man. That passage could have been longer, guys. It could have been longer. So we're going to go through a few more of them during this Easter season, celebrating who Jesus is or says he is. We do it in the 10th. This is John 1, but it's actually John 10. That was my mistake. Very truly, I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheepfold by the gate, but climbs in by another way is a thief and a bandit. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will not follow a stranger, but they will run from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this figure of speech with them, but they did not understand what he was saying to them. So Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and bandits, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. So these I am statements are only found in the Gospel of John. They are unique to him. So we learned a lot about the Gospel of John during Lent. We learned he's very, very wordy. We learned he's pretty weird. He's kind of scandalous. But he's always trying to show us that Jesus is the Messiah and what that means. And not just for us, but for us personally, what that means for us as a community of faith, what that means for the world. And as I said, we're in the 10th chapter following the story of the man born blind who Jesus healed. Nerdy worship fact. We did that in the 4th week of Lent. We're now in the 4th week of Easter. Yeah, I know I'm the only one who cares about that, but I figured that out this week. Okay. So we're continuing that conversation. And so this figure of speech that gets referenced that says he uses this figure of speech that they didn't understand is this image of a gate or a door, one that would have been familiar in the communities that Jesus was around, rural ones, herding communities. The idea that a gate keeps sheep from wandering off. Hopefully the gate or the pen protects them from those who want to do them harm. And he lists who those people are. He says they're thieves and they're robbers. And I love he says they're strangers. They're not familiar. They're not part of the community who are trying to get to them by sneaking around the gate or going over the gate, by not using the door. Because their intention is only to harm, to kill, to destroy. And since this one follows the blind man's story, he seems to be talking about the religious leaders who kept doubting him, who kept misunderstanding him in that story, saying that they're the thieves and the robbers, they're the strangers to the sheep, to the people of God. He's pointing out how they're sharing a message of God's love and care in word, but not in the ways that they act. They were demanding monies from the very people they were supposed to support, like widows and orphans. They were excluding and keeping out of the community this blind man, the very person who probably needed their most support. So he's pointing it out to them. And so I started to be curious, should we be looking around for people like that? They're not always that hard to find. People who say they're working on behalf of God, but they're not. They're stealing from their followers or spending their time condemning or excluding people. Is Jesus saying to keep those people out? I always get very nervous around that because then it starts to sound like we're creating our own gates in that way, saying those people shouldn't be in the community either. Aren't we creating just new exclusions? That's why I think this is so confusing. I appreciate that the author of John says they didn't understand it the first time. Okay, well, that's good. Sometimes it's hard for me the first time. I've been trained and taught that gates and doors are for keeping dangers out. And I do believe, I am convinced that's what Jesus is meaning. But he also says this. He says, anyone, whoever enters by me will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. Anyone? Anyone? We can't just let anyone in, right? What about people who aren't physically safe for us, or people who promote dissent in really unhealthy ways, or want to help vulnerable populations that Jesus has taught us to care about? The one I thought about here is we've made such a big focus around welcoming children and welcoming children in the room. So if somebody came in and wanted to do a really big campaign that we don't want children in worship anymore, we'd have to have a discussion about that, right? Can I get an amen? All right. And we don't just welcome children into worship because we're nice people or we're good people. We do it because Jesus commands us to do it. He says we're supposed to welcome children and stand up for children and let them be themselves fully and completely, that they are full participants in the kingdom and in the church. So if somebody was saying not to do that, Gary also taught me this phrase in moments like that, in difficult situations. And he said he's used it and taught me to use it when necessary. He would say things, that's not how we do church. We don't keep people out, but we do have defined ways of being. It's a way of differentiating church community from other communities, explaining our gate to people. Our gate looks different. Organizations, businesses can have certain practices, so do churches. Ours include worship and singing and praying and studying and eating together and serving together and treating each other like neighbors. Community or neighborhood organizations, they have certain events, they have activities. Apparently we have Bunko, but we also have activities. We have youth group and children's lessons and adult studies. We have outreach activities for those inside our congregation and for those out in our community. Anyone who's ever, I've met the people who've worked in the business field and then gotten into ministry, and they understand they have learned very quickly you are in a new land, not like the other land. We move much slower, but we also have an abundance of grace that you might not be as familiar with. At our best, this is who we are. We speak firmly to each other, but gently. We show up for baby dedications for kids that aren't in our own families. We show up at funerals for people we didn't know, but for people who matter to them. We write cards and we make calls because someone is just hurting or they have something to celebrate. We serve each other, whether that's a friend or a visitor. Every single decision in our lives, if we choose, can be a gospel decision, shaped by this very particular gate, because he promises the fold that we will have life and have it abundantly through this gate. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have healthy boundaries. In fact, I think that's kind of what he's saying, that we value them very highly in order to create a safe community. I think that's why he uses this image of a gate. There are things to keep out. We support boundaries that promote a safe community. And what we mean by safe is safe here, safe for our souls, safe for ourselves to be who we are. Because being safe for Jesus doesn't always mean we're going to be comfortable. Can I get an amen on that? Yeah, because sometimes going to lead us places that are unfamiliar, places we've never been. Some of us are going to go to Water Step today. We've never been there before. We're going to take extra time. We do all these things for Jesus because we know with him, our souls are safe. Because with him is grace and forgiveness and radical inclusivity and welcome. And those are things other places can't always provide us. But this gate can. This passage actually gets used regularly in something called healthy boundaries. I don't know if you know this, but if you want to be a minister anywhere in the Disciples of Christ, you have to go to certain programs, and one of them is healthy boundaries. And we have to do it every 5 years and get updated on it because we are often put in a lot of situations where we need to know how to have healthy boundaries with members, with people who come into the church, but also that we want to help be part of congregations that have healthy boundaries. And this is where I get to just cheerlead you guys, because you guys are great at this. I want to lift you up that you are so good at this. We read a covenant at the beginning of every elder meeting, at every board meeting, about who we're going to be, about what shapes us. And it is all grounded in Scripture. It is all grounded in Jesus. It is about the way we're going to be here. But I don't want to say it's just your leaders. I see you living it. I watch you offer grace and forgiveness in real time. I watch you ask hard questions because you love the church and you love Jesus. I've seen you offer hospitality, welcoming all kinds of people into all kinds of places of the church, whether that's in the pew or in leadership or in the pulpit or up front in worship. This is the place of, this is what I think of when I think of this is what church is like. This is how we do church. In the ways we treat each other, in the ways we treat visitors and neighbors, how we handle what is easy and what is hard. Because we know the gate that we enter through is how we create that safe space for our souls in a world that often doesn't feel safe. Because this gate that Jesus refers to, he keeps repeating, is for anyone, is for all the sheep. And not just to keep them in, but so that they can go back out and find pasture. So they could be community, so they could be church, they could be together, they could eat together, worship together, so they could do it all in order to follow the voice of Jesus and where that voice leads them. They know they're safe because they recognize his voice. They know they're safe because they have this gate that offers them life. When our boundaries are shaped by the life and the teachings and the death and the resurrection of Jesus, we too can create and be a place where people can come in and be nourished and be cared for and be seen and be heard and find rest and pasture. As I said, this doesn't mean we don't challenge each other. It doesn't mean we agree about everything. But we have agreed to be together in a particular way, in certain ways, that enable us to see each other always as neighbors. Not as thieves and robbers, and certainly not as strangers. Jesus has his own robbers and thieves who want to steal and kill and destroy. He points them out and names them there. And I said, that those behaviors and that ways of being change over time. For Jesus, it was the ones he was interacting with. In our own lives, maybe we could name some of those people, and then I have to be real honest. Sometimes maybe I'm that person too. But Jesus' gate offers something that doesn't require stealing or snatching or destroying. He's not trying to simply show us how to either be good or bad people, but much more than that. We're building something here. He talks of building a kingdom, of building an entire community who knows to whom they belong, who does shape every decision, every choice, every way of speaking. One who is fully and completely present for them, so that we can be fully and present with him and with others. Who wants to create places that we can return to again and again and again to celebrate or to grieve. A place to ask questions and have doubts. A place to be fed and nourished and accepted. He said, anyone can be safe if they go through this gate. One that is easily recognizable when we see grace and forgiveness, when we see gentleness and self-control and love and justice for all. In our old house, we had a basement, and when Brooke was little, we of course had to have a gate, right? Because I wanted to keep her safe. That was one of the ways I kept her safe. We also have a term that when she would get too far ahead, I forgot to tell you I was going to talk about this, sorry. We say red light, and that means you immediately stop what you're doing. And for a long time, I was able to keep her physically safe. But she's going to do this like growing up thing and go out into a world. And there will be no gates for me that I can buy at Target to protect her. So the gate I offer instead is a Jesus-shaped one. It says, when the world gets hard and scary and unknown, when the things you thought were sure become unsure, I can tell her the gospel hasn't changed. The good news is still true. That I am sure of. Because we need that kind of support and safety. I can't guarantee my physical health. It's been true multiple times in my life. But my soul was okay. I know people have experienced both things in churches, safe and unsafe. And maybe some of those people are here right now. And that's the testament. You're still here. You're still in community. Because the sheep pen that is protected by Jesus has no comparison. When people genuinely agree to serve and sacrifice, to care and protect for God's glory, there is nothing like it. I know I joked about Gary giving me the very hard sermon subject, but I want to share something much more important about him. He's one of the people I thought of when I thought about an example of someone who makes you feel safe. Gary has walked me through the most difficult transitions and struggles of my life. He's been through more than one tragedy and loss with me. And through it all, he covered me in prayer and showed me how essential that was to ministry and just being a Christian in the world. He couldn't stop any of the hard things from happening to me. But he showed me there were still safe spaces and some pastures that existed in the midst of it. Gary is not Jesus, but he has loved him his whole life long and given his life in ministry to him and to many others, pointing people to that gate over and over and over again. And he learned this from Jesus, but he also learned it from congregations that loved him and showed him grace and love and forgiveness. Yes, this is how we do church. Jesus is trying to give us a whole way of being, a world that we are building with him, shaped by these metaphors of ordinary objects, ordinary places, to see the world differently, to see ourselves differently in it, as a way to move in the world, to know who to identify, who to fight for, who to fight with. Because when we know who Jesus is, when we know our relationship and how to be in relationship to him, these gates, these boundaries help us to be more of who we really are, who God created us to be. God's beloved and beautiful community.